Can you use the Fuji X-M5 as a webcam? Yes, you can. In fact, I'm using it right now. However, there's a few considerations that you need to make when it comes to, overheating, battery life, how to connect it to your PC, which I will be talking about right now. First, to get the conclusion out there up front, if you're planning to use this primarily as a webcam for streaming or anything of that sort, I think there's probably better choices out there. However, if you bought this camera, primarily because it's such a great hybrid camera, probably the best out there at its price point, especially given how compact it is, you can use this for streaming, for using it as a webcam, for stuff like that. It's just you have to put a bit of effort into it to making it work. Specifically, you have to take some measures to prevent it from overheating and obviously to deal with the battery life. So what I did is I made this super cool, professionally created infographic that you can see on screen right now, which basically summarizes everything that I'm going to talk about. So what you need to know is that there's essentially 5 methods that you can use to run this camera. It comes down to how you power it and also how you're going to get the image from your camera to your PC. So for the image, you have 2 options. You can either get the image via USB or via HDMI. There's like a micro HDMI port, I think is what it's called. Then you need an HDMI capture card, and then you can plug that in via USB to your computer. Then for powering it, your first option is obviously to just power it straight off of the battery, right? But then you're gonna run into your battery life running out after around an hour, both for USB and HDMI. This is gonna be a great option for you if you're just planning to use this for like a short Zoom call of like half an hour or something like that. Then, however, if you're planning to use this for a longer time, you will need another power source. And you have 2 options here. You have to power this via USB or via a dummy battery. Now, in case you're wondering why there's this X here for USB, that is because the X-M5 has this weird quirk where you can't use the USB connection from your PC to the camera to simultaneously exchange data and to charge the camera. You can only do one of those things. So either you're using the USB connection to charge your camera, or you're using it to send data, which is what you're doing when you're using this as a webcam. So that's why there's an X here. It's just because you can't do both. You can only do one at a time. So when it comes to using the USB as a power source, I generally don't recommend it. I mean, your only option here is to run this via HDMI anyways, but why I don't recommend it is because it will overheat, at least in my testing, after about 1 hour and 50 minutes. So you're better off instead using a dummy battery. It's essentially like a battery like those. You put it into the actual battery compartment of your camera, but you can put this into like I think a power outlet is what it's called, and charge or like power your camera that way. Now, in both instances of using a dummy battery with USB or with HDMI, it ran for over 4 hours. That's just the duration that I tested it for. It might very much run like a lot longer than that. Either way, your only concern here would be when it would start overheating, because obviously like a dummy battery, it can't run out, right? Now, when it comes to overheating, it running for 4 hours is like pretty good. Now, what you need to know is that first, there's a setting in the settings that you need to activate about like how sensitive it's going to be to the temperature, and you need to adjust it so that it shuts off later. I will show the setting on screen so you'll know what I mean. And then another thing is that like the screen on the camera is flipped out, because if it's not flipped out, then it's going to cover the back of the camera, which is where all the heat is going to come from, and like then will probably overheat a lot faster. And that place where the screen usually goes, you can attach a fan there. So in case you do plan on using this camera for streaming for longer than 4 hours, and it might possibly be the case that it won't run a lot longer than 4 hours without overheating, I'm like very, very certain that at least if you attach a fan to it, it will probably run indefinitely. This is assuming like normal room temperature, which is where I'm running this. It might be different if you're like living in a different climate and it's like summer and 30 degrees or whatever. Maybe then you would find with different issues, but at least in my normal circumstances, I did not have to fight with overheating when using this with a dummy battery. However, and this is the little signals that you see here, like the yellow and the orange, is the camera on screen will show you like an indicator of the temperature of the camera. And there will be like 2 indicators before it shuts off. The first will be a yellow one, and then the next one will be a red one, which I've made orange here because, well, the batteries and the actual overheating is already red, so I need to differentiate those 2. What I noticed is that the USB one might run a little bit cooler simply based off the fact that both of them had the yellow indicator after half an hour, but the red indicator took an hour to appear with the USB one, while it appeared 5 minutes after the yellow one with HDMI. Now you might wonder, what is actually the difference here between USB and HDMI? Is there like a noticeable difference here? Is there like a solid reason to choose one over the other? And the answer is yes. Yes, there is. There's a difference between both of these. And the difference is that if you run this via USB, you're going to get full HD output at 30 FPS. And this is what it looks like, right? This is the colors. This is how I'm running it right now. Now, if you're running this via HDMI, you can actually go up to 60 FPS at full HD. However, what I noticed is that the colors don't look quite as nice. The image still looks super good. It's just the colors, they don't look quite as nice as they do look right now. Like this almost looks color graded in a way. It's not the case with HDMI. It's not bad by any means. This might also come down to the capture card that you're using though. So I think the industry standard, especially when it comes to streaming with using a camera like this, is to use something like the Elgato Camlink, which is a capture card that costs, I think, over 100 euros. The one I'm using is 20 euros. Now, again, I still think the image holds up quite well. I will probably show both on screen right now so you can compare the USB between the HDMI one. There will be a link to the specific HDMI capture card that I'm using for this demo in the description. In general, everything that I'm talking about will be linked in the description, so you know, like the exact models. And yeah, so this is basically what it comes down to. So TLDR, if you want to use the short for like a quick Zoom meeting or something like that, you can just use it plug and play via the USB connection. You just have to set it in the settings to use the USB connection for data transfer and not for charging the camera, because you can only do one at a time. And if you're planning to use this for a longer period of times, right, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, perhaps even longer than that, though you might need a fan then that you can attach to the camera, then you will definitely want to run this via a dummy battery. So these are essentially your 3 options right here, either just USB or a dummy battery with either USB or HDMI as for transferring the image signal. Now this essentially covers how to run and connect the camera to your PC and the different options you have and which one you might want to use in which situation. Now, there's one quirk that this camera has which might make or break this for you for using this as a webcam, especially when we're talking about like streaming and using this regularly for long periods of time. And that is that randomly, in some moments, the camera just blacks out and freezes. And depending on the lens that you're using, for some reason, you might need to go into like whatever webcam software you're using and need to reselect the camera to get the camera feed showing again, which is very, very odd. I have found that if I use the kit lens, what happens instead is when the camera freezes, the lens resets its focal length. It goes back to 50 millimeters. I usually set it to 23. So there will be like a black screen for like a second or so. And then the focal length will be different, it will be wider, and I have to readjust it, which is quite annoying. But yeah, this is the thing that happens, and it's super random. I haven't been able to reproduce it. I found that when I first got this camera, it would happen like every 5 minutes. But then the longer I used the camera, the rarer it would be that this would happen. And now this happens to me like once every hour, once every 2 hours. But at the beginning it was like a lot more frequent. No idea what this is. I searched this up on the internet. This seems to be like a thing in general with Fuji cameras that sometimes they just randomly freeze. This might be like a make it or break it thing for you if you're planning to use this, like especially for streaming. So just be aware of that. I think the best thing you can do is that if you're buying this specifically for the use case of, or if this is like one of your main use cases is to use this for streaming, then you will probably want to test this as long as this is in like the period where you can like get a refund, because this might be a deal breaker to you. Might also come down to the specific unit that you got. Maybe this is just my unit acting up like this, but again, I have found other posts on the internet stating this exact problem, specifically with Fuji cameras. Now let's get to how to actually get like a proper image, because if you just use the camera out of the box, your image might not look this crisp. First, I'm not using the kit lens, which I have right here. I'm using the Viltrox 23mm f1.4, which you want a wider aperture if you want like a proper like depth of field, blurry background kind of stuff. That's what you want a fast aperture for, which is like a lower aperture number. Then when it comes to focal length, I don't think you want a longer focal length than 23mm. The camera is like about an arm's length away. I think 23mm is like ideal for that. I bought this lens because it's just in general like an all-around great focal length to use for all kinds of different situations. Then lens is not even the full story. I think the biggest difference in like image quality you're gonna get out of a camera, even if you're using your phone, will be lighting. So just to compare this quickly, if I'm not using any lighting, this is what the image would be like. I mean, there's a little bit of lighting coming from the like screen in front of me, but without the proper lighting, it's just not the same. Now, ideally, what's considered good lighting is soft lighting, which is basically lighting with no hard shadows, which you can see like there's no hard shadows on my face. If I like have a hand in front of me, you don't see the shape of my hand like a silhouette on my face. That's called soft lighting. Now, usually if you want soft lighting, you need a softbox, which I don't have because, man, a softbox is expensive. We're talking about like 100 euros or something like that. The light that I'm using is already 150 euros. So what I'm doing is, if you're planning to get a light yourself, again, I will link the one I'm using in the description, is what I'm doing is I'm just pointing it at the white wall that I have, and then I'm using that kind of as a softbox. So right now it's just, you know, reflecting the light from the wall onto my face, and this is what's the cause for this like softer lighting. So yeah, if you want great image quality, TLDR, you might want to change your lens to a faster aperture for the blurry background. And second, you want great lighting. If you don't want to afford a softbox, what you can use instead is just shine the light to the wall and create softer lighting that way. Now, I know when I was considering buying this camera, I was searching wide on the internet to try to find out anything about using this as a webcam, and I haven't found anything at all. So this might not just be the first YouTube video about this specific topic, it might be the first post on the entire internet about using this camera as a webcam. Potentially. At least personally, I haven't found anything else. So I really hope that if you searched this video up, probably, that I was able to help somehow. If you want to help me out, all the products that I just talked about will be linked in the description via affiliate links, which just means that if you use them, there will be no additional cost to you, but I get a small provision. Important to mention, I'm not affiliated with any of the brands that I'm talking about there. I'm not sponsored or anything like this. I just, again, made this video because no one else on the internet seems to have talked about this at all. So there's probably someone out there curious about this. Anyways, this is it, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day, and bye-bye.